Chapter 01 Get Rich by Stripping Trees. A meteor streaked across the sky with a deafening roar. A massive crater appeared on the ground. A vast plain stretched around it, but a lush, primeval forest could be seen tens of miles to the south. The roar startled numerous birds and beasts, a cacophony of strange sounds erupting. However, from the deepest part of the forest a peculiar, low growl echoed, followed by a swift return to silence, as if nothing had happened. Time passed slowly. A strange sound emanated from the crater. Then, a young man, stark naked, emerged, looking rather disheveled. Where am I? Stephen Cho felt his head was a complete mess. He shook his head and lay on his back. After 10 minutes, the dizziness gradually subsided. Oh my God! Suddenly he leaped to his feet, then stared dumbfounded at the sky. As dawn broke, a gigantic purple ring appeared in the heavens, with 3 moons, each the size of a satellite, positioned at the top, middle, and bottom of the ring. Stephen Cho shook his head to clear his thoughts, muttering, "Looks like I've landed on a habitable planet. Lucky me. Something's wrong. Why am I still a little dizzy?" Stephen Cho tried to move his body, feeling a little woozy. As if he were drunk, he took a deep breath and exclaimed in surprise, "The oxygen content of this world is a bit high! I think I'm experiencing altitude sickness, fatigue, weakness, drowsiness, chest tightness, dizziness, diarrhea." Although the diarrhea hadn't started yet, Stephen Cho was increasingly certain he was experiencing altitude sickness. About 10 minutes later, Stephen finally recovered. He tried to jump in place, then muttered, "The gravity isn't small. Probably a coefficient of 1.5. Judging by the rings in the sky, this planet is a bit like Saturn. And it seems quite large! Note Earth's gravity coefficient is 1. The temperature is fine." Stephen pulled a blade of grass from the ground, examined it, then tossed it aside, saying, "What luck, I've landed on a large terrestrial planet." As one of the strongest alchemists in history, Stephen was currently quite weak. If he had landed in a harsher environment, his situation would be far more difficult. His body was severely damaged, and almost all the top-level alchemic formations etched into his body had failed. He had to find a way to restore his strength, right? Stephen, as if struck by a sudden inspiration, leaped into the meteorite crater with the desperation of a cornered dog, then clambered back out, laughing, holding a strange golden seed. "What a treasure!" he chuckled, examining the golden seed in his palm. Turning it over and over, he murmured, "It looks a bit like an acorn. I wonder what world it's from. I really owe this thing my life. If I hadn't found it, I'd probably be exiled to the edge of the void, imprisoned forever, for privately researching forbidden arts." Stephen Cho was sentenced to immediate and permanent imprisonment. Fortunately, on his way to exile, the void fleet escorting him encountered a space-time anomaly, allowing him a narrow escape. This golden seed was the only object within that anomaly. At the time, he grabbed it without a second thought, nearly depleting his legendary artifacts in the process. "This seed seems to possess the power of the laws of the universe. I wonder if I can eat it." Stephen Cho didn't hesitate. He popped the golden seed into his mouth. A sharp crack was followed by a piercing scream as he clutched his jaw. Spit. Stephen Cho spat out a trace of blood, then held up the golden seed. Seems it's not edible." A cold wind. Stephen shivered involuntarily. He had nearly exhausted all his strength breaking through the barriers of time and space to escape the temporal turbulence, sacrificing all his legendary equipment. Even the semi-artifact forged with the blood of the abyssal fiend had turned to ash. He was weaker than he had imagined. He hadn't expected the physical toll to be so great. Even the permanent alchemic engravings had failed. Stephen was currently naked, but with a flick of his finger, the golden seed in his palm vanished. He checked his bearings and ran towards the forest to the south. His luck wasn't entirely bad. The demoplane had opened was still intact. Oh well, he could research that later. First, in a secure base. As an alchemist master not known for his combat prowess, the Stephen clan always prioritized self-preservation above all else. On the empty plains, a rather handsome young man ran at high speed, completely naked. His manhood swung with each stride and leap, somehow managing to exude an aura of freedom, exuberance, and wildness against the backdrop of the primitive, desolate landscape. That's the confidence of someone from the Chaos Alignment. Soon, Stephen reached the edge of the forest. This was a dense, primeval forest. The species of trees were currently unknown, but each one grew exceptionally lush and tall. Even on the outer edge, they were over 20 meters high, while many inside the forest reached heights exceeding 100 meters. These were giant trees! The trees in this world were all incredibly thick. Looking into the forest, trees requiring several people to embrace were commonplace. The interior of the forest gave Stephen a sense of danger, so he didn't dare approach too closely. He simply chose a tree about a meter in diameter on the outer edge. To get rich, one must first fell trees! The Stephen clan were the most magical alchemists in the universe. Every qualified Stephen alchemist could touch upon a sliver of the power of the laws of nature. "I never thought I'd be felling trees from scratch." Stephen Cho shook his head and sighed, then, full of energy, clenched his fist and began to strike the 18-meter-tall, 1-meter-diameter tree before him. Invisible white light emanated from his fist. After about 10 strikes, the tree crashed to the ground, revealing an impossibly smooth cross-section at the break. It didn't look like it had been broken by hand at all. Felling a giant tree by hand, a hallmark of the Stephen clan. After felling the tree, Stephen Cho immediately got to work, spending over 10 minutes breaking the entire tree down into individual blocks of wood. These collected lumber promptly vanished into thin air, only a pile of useless branches and leaves remained where he had been. Stephen Cho didn't go far. He chose a flat piece of land 100 meters away and then pulled out a large pile of lumber, busying himself with it. Finally done! Minutes later, a workbench 1 meter high, 2 meters wide, and 3 meters long was completed. Stephen Cho looked at it with satisfaction and said, "Even though I haven't done this in years, it's still master level." Ha! A proud laugh. Stephen Cho currently had nothing but wood, so he could only make this most primitive workbench for now. Let's make a shovel first. Stephen Cho selected a high-quality piece of wood, then lightly traced his finger across it. An incredibly smooth cut appeared. His finger was like the sharpest, most precise scalpel. In just a few minutes, he had carved a wooden shovel. But it was just a wooden shovel. Looking at the tool before him, Stephen Cho murmured with a hint of reluctance, "This is all the power I have left." A faint golden light appeared. The ordinary wooden shovel for him seemed coated in some strange magical film. The wood grain deepened, appearing as sturdy as ironwood. Wooden shovels, durability LV1, efficiency LV win. Feeling the loss of power within him, Stephen Cho's expression was conflicted. In the past he would never have enchanted such a low-level wooden tool. But now he had nothing else, and the efficiency of wooden tools was truly garbage. He could only make do for the time being. Since he'd already made one, he might as well make another. Wooden pickaxe, durability LV1, efficiency LV. With the two basic tools complete, Stephen Cho immediately began work. He first used the wooden shovel to level the ground, creating a flat surface. Then he began to dig downwards. As a legendary alchemist, Stephen Cho's method of digging was completely unconventional. The earth he excavated came out in 1 cubic meter blocks, vanishing into thin air the moment he touched them. In about 10 minutes, he had dug a pit 2 meters wide and long, and 20 meters deep. No human remains were found. Stephen Cho took out the wooden ladder he had prepared beforehand and casually pressed it against the smooth wall, where it firmly attached itself. He climbed down the ladder to the ground, found a level spot, and with a wave of his hand, created a small mountain from blocks of earth that appeared out of nowhere. Since there were no human remains underground, the likelihood of previous human activity here was very low. Stephen had dug down to bedrock and surveyed a portion of the underground area. Where there are people, there are graves, and burials always leave some trace. He was a little hungry. Stephen rubbed his stomach. Although alchemists possessed magical power, much of their work was physically demanding. He always had a large appetite, and after his labors, he felt his stomach had shrunk to nothing. Besides, he was missing a garment. He'd find food first. If he couldn't get leather, he'd make clothes from leaves. Stephen picked up his heavy wooden pickaxe and headed towards the forest. The world's oxygen level was a little high. The lush vegetation indicated the presence of many large predators. He only hoped his luck wouldn't be so bad that he'd encounter a large one immediately, and he could find a smaller target for his first meal. He'd temporarily set up a safe base underground. This would avoid many dangers. It was nearing midday, and he could certainly build a rudimentary underground shelter before nightfall. Stephen needed to store some food. Then he could start mining underground to develop a base. Before figuring out how to explore this world, he was an alchemist. Without equipment and materials, he was essentially crippled. Chapter 2 Master Pit Digger. Many unknown mushrooms grew in the dense primeval forest. Unfortunately, Stephen Cho's strength had plummeted, and he dared not risk trying to see if they were edible. Deep within the primeval forest, occasionally came some huge doe, making his heart thump wildly. He was certain there were super large carnivorous beasts inside. The danger level was uncertain, but it was at least 3 or higher. Note the danger level of a pterodon is 1-5. What monster left? Stephen Chow hadn't gone far into the forest when he saw some incredibly large footprints on the ground, 80 centimeters in diameter, heavier in the rear. The hind footprints were larger and deeper, indicating the creature's weight was concentrated on its hind legs while moving. Judging by the height of broken branches, it was approximately 6 meters tall and weighed over 10 tons. The footprints were some time old, confirming that this wasn't its territory, but that it had come to the forest's edge for some reason. A gust of wind blew. As Stephen Cho observed the enormous footprint before him, a dark shadow suddenly lunged from the dense forest path. Stephen Chow rolled awkwardly out of the way, but a searing pain still struck him. A bloody claw mark was left on his back. A large feline, a leopard, a tiger. In the fleeting glimpse, Stephen Cho hadn't seen his attacker clearly, but as it attacked again, he finally saw what it was: a massive mountain lion, 7 meters long, nearly a meter tall when standing, and weighing approximately 270 kilograms. It had amber eyes, looking like a ferocious tiger. And what unsettled Stephen Cho even more was that this mountain lion had 2 tails. Meow, though a cat's call. The sound was low and menacing. The mountain cat, having missed its strike, lunged again. This time, Stephen Cho didn't dodge. As the creature pounced, he dropped to one knee, swinging his wooden pickaxe upwards. A faint golden light shimmered. The wood transformed in an instant into gleaming silver metal. A blood-curdling scream followed as the pickaxe cleaved the mountain cat, splitting it open from head to tail in a gruesome display of entrails and blood. Even this horrific wound didn't kill the 2-tailed beast immediately. It staggered 5 or 6 steps before collapsing, twitching violently for a while before finally expiring. As expected, the higher oxygen levels have led to the gigantism of this world's animals. A mountain cat the size of a tiger. Are those 2 tails a mutation? Stephen Chow drank some of the blood to replenish his electrolytes and energy, then hoisted the enormous carcass onto his shoulder. Without looking back, he ran towards the edge of the forest. Many beasts possess an acute sense of smell, some can detect blood from kilometers away. He needed to get away quickly and dispose of the body before attracting more predators. Alchemists, while not known for combat prowess, generally possess above-average physical fitness, especially those like Stephen Chow, who specialized in mining, often surpassing many warriors in strength and endurance. Soon he returned to his temporary base. The scent of blood had attracted some carnivores, but none ventured far from the forest's depths, turning back at the edge. This place has a unique ecosystem. Many beasts appear to be distributed according to some unseen rule, confined to specific territories. Stephen Chow placed the enormous mountain lion on the workbench. In the blink of an eye, he skinned and butchered it. His hands seemed to possess some strange magic. With a few rubs, he'd crafted the leather. Next he plucked the mountain lion's fur, twisting it with his fingers into a single, fine thread. Then, selecting a slender bone, he pierced it to create a needle. Within 10 minutes, he had cut and sewn a rudimentary leather tunic and trousers. At last, he had clothes and wouldn't have to go around bare. Stephen Chow let out a long sigh, then said with a grimace, "Next time, I'll have to use the conventional method. Otherwise, I'll run out of energy too quickly." As the most prodigious alchemist, Stephen Chow's power came from his work in activities like planting, mining, forging, and alchemy. He could rapidly extract elements from nature to replenish his depleted magical energy, storing it within his body. This efficiency far surpassed the meditative practices of ordinary alchemists, and was the reason for his ascension to legendary alchemist status at such a young age. According to his past data projections, at his peak, his power approached the limits of human potential. However, at the time, unable to break through a bottleneck, he deliberately reduced his strength, using soul enchantment to craft a semi-divine artifact and focusing his research on creatures called abominations, hoping this would help him transcend human limitations. But the plan encountered an unexpected setback early on. He was framed, and ultimately sentenced to life imprisonment. Stephen Chow disliked combat because it consumed too much magic. In his view, magic should be saved for ordinary times, and then, once the limit was reached, he would break through the bottleneck and level up in one go. Stephen Chow's body could store dozens or even hundreds of times more magic than an ordinary wizard, but his consumption during combat increased exponentially. A large-scale battle often required him to spend a long time cultivating to recover. His incredibly high magic capacity made replenishment slow, making combat detrimental to his advancement. He was an academic, research-oriented alchemist, not one of those battle-crazed fighters. The core principle of alchemy is equivalent exchange. Even if it seems inequivalent, it must appear equivalent in some way, like a kilogram of gold and a kilogram of brass, whether you believe it or not. Top-tier alchemists believe them to be equivalent. Those who understand this have the talent to become alchemists. Stephen Chow had exhausted most of his power in the space-time turbulence. Currently, he only had one ability left, altering matter form. A handful of mountain cat fur. He transformed it into a 10-meter-long thread, but it was essentially still mountain cat fur, just extraordinarily long. It didn't turn into cotton thread, to put it simply. This is the extent of Stephen Chow's current abilities. Only when he can turn brass into gold will he be considered to have truly recovered a fraction of his past power. Strictly speaking, all the abilities Stephen Chow has demonstrated are merely apprentice-level tricks among alchemists. Of course, this standard cannot be applied to other indigenous civilizations, as an alchemist capable of this is already quite formidable among them. Moreover, no one except Stephen Chow can perform these tricks with such finesse. Above all else, food is paramount. Although the passage through the space-time turbulence had stopped the internal time flow, Stephen Chow was very hungry after being active for so long. He was a man of broad-mindedness. He didn't even bother to think about how much time had passed in and out of the space-time turbulence, whether he was still in his original galaxy, or even if he was still in his original universe. Even if he wanted to think about it, there was nothing he could do. The Arcane Empire had traversed the space-time turbulence to reach the universe he had previously inhabited. Making a fire was simple. Stephen Chow casually flicked his fingers, and a bonfire sprang up. He then threaded the mountain cat meat onto a stick and roasted it over the flames. He was a man who appreciated the finer things in life. Though most alchemists were homebodies, they were all first-rate at enjoying life without oil, salt, soy sauce, or vinegar. The mountain cat meat had a strong fishy smell, making it unappetizing even when hungry. Stephen Chow could only make do to fill his stomach for now, and then find a way to improve his living conditions. He didn't know the situation of this world yet, but a legendary alchemist could build a paradise even on a Death Star. If all else failed, he would bury himself in mining for a dozen years and then build a floating city. It was nothing to start over. Since he'd already dug the pit underground, Stephen Chow naturally transferred his base to a safe location. He packed up the mountain cat meat, put away his workbench, and then went down the stairs to the underground level. He needed some torture. Stephen put away his workbench and reinforced the surrounding walls with alchemy before taking out his wooden pickaxe and starting to mine stone. This process was much slower. Stone was much harder than other materials. Stephen Chow's tools were inadequate. It took him over 50 swings to mine a 1 cubic meter block of stone, and the wooden pickaxe wore down very quickly. because of his ability to alter the state of matter. The Mind Stone was a perfectly intact block, as if cut with top-of-the-line machinery. Stephen Cho first gathered a batch of stones, then moved them to his workbench to begin crafting the Stone Age! Regardless, he was sick of these wooden tools. Time to upgrade to the Stone Age. Crafting stone tools consumed more energy, but thankfully it only involved changing the basic shape of the material, not its inherent nature. Stephen Cho could still handle it. In his early stages, most of the power accumulation for an alchemist like him came from farming, as it was the most energy-efficient method. Alchemists of Stephen's clan were cautious about enchanting, as top-tier soul enchanting would temporarily lower their power level. Level cap remains unchanged. If only I had an iron golem. Stephen Cho sighed while grinding the stone tools. Let the iron golem handle the basic work, and he'll only complete the most crucial steps. Speaking of which, where am I supposed to find some iron ore? Having just upgraded to the Stone Age, Stephen Cho yearned for the Iron Age, but currently, he was completely lost in this world and dared not wander around. A single mountain cat could injure him. Encountering other wild beasts would be disastrous. He needed a large amount of gold to reactivate the alchemic engravings on his body. Time passed quickly. After crafting the stone tools, Stephen Cho looked at the wound on his back. It was almost completely healed. Alchemists have their own unique way of understanding things. For example, take his wounds. First, the skin was broken, right? Then a lot of blood flowed out, right? Then the flesh was also cut open, right? But he had just eaten a lot of wildcat meat, replenishing the nutrients his body needed to repair these wounds. Since the nutrients for wound repair were sufficient, the wounds should heal quickly, right? Fine. Orv as a legendary alchemist. Stephen Cho's body is one of the pinnacles of alchemic achievement. Whoosh, with a bloody cocoon peeled away. Stephen Cho's back was smooth and new, completely devoid of any scars. He moved his body, then picked up his stone pickaxe and began his mining work. Stone is fundamental to construction. Since there's no way to obtain iron ore at the moment, he can only stockpile some stone for now. Chapter Xuanhuan 3's Underground Base. Night. The darkness brought Stephen Cho an inexplicable chill. Before nightfall completely enveloped him, he sealed the cave entrance with mud, then altered its molecular structure to reinforce it, creating a 3-meter thick barrier. A torch flare. Stephen Cho had pre-built several concealed ventilation shafts underground, and then began constructing his bed. This was simple. He crafted a masterful single bed in just 10 minutes, placing it near the southern ventilation shaft. A faint moonlight filtered into the underground space, but at some point, he felt an inexplicable sense of danger, as if something terrifying had appeared above. He fashioned a rudimentary blanket from mountain lion hide, then lay on his back, staring at the ceiling for a while. He considered climbing up to investigate, because he sensed strange sounds from the surface. Sounds that escalated into violent tremors. The underground base was continually shedding dust. Nocturnal animals shouldn't be this active. And he also heard a series of dull roars emanating from the forest. I knew this world wasn't that simple. Stephen Cho held the two tails of the mountain lion, studying them, but ultimately decided to sleep through it. Alchemists weren't adept at combat. He wasn't going to risk his life. Moreover, the Saturn-like purple rings circling this planet's sky were unsettling. 3 large moons orbiting it, easily altering the planet's energy field. Who knew what would happen if he went up there now? He might just get himself killed. The strange sounds continued until dawn. Stephen Cho barely slept all night. He merely closed his eyes and rested, several times almost giving in to the urge to climb out and investigate, but ultimately resisted. A day on this world lasted roughly 25 hours, so dawn arrived fairly quickly. Stephen Cho hastily ate something, then carefully picked up his weapons and prepared to climb up for a look. Nothing seemed outwardly different. But Stephen Cho took a sniff and his face paled. He muttered, "Such a strong smell of blood." 300 meters to the right, Stephen Cho saw several horned deer, the size of adult horses, killed by some kind of monster, their carcasses half-eaten. The signs of battle were concentrated in the forested area. Stephen Cho saw hundreds of beast carcasses scattered in the distance. Some were mutated species he had never seen before. There were strange bones on the ground, grey bones that melted rapidly in the sunlight, vanishing completely in a short time. Many places were stained with dark brown blood. But nothing could be found besides the animal corpses. It was as if everything had simply disappeared into thin air suddenly. A sense of impending danger sent Stephen Cho diving into the nearby grass. Immediately afterward, he saw a huge dark shadow swoop down from the sky, seize a beast carcass, and then soar away toward the distant mountains. Pterodactyl. Stephen Cho stared dumbfounded at the sky. The creature that had just appeared resembled a pterodactyl, with a wingspan of about 10 meters, strong hind legs, and a head somewhat like a mutated duck. From wings to tail, it was an inverted triangle shape, resembling a Quetzalcoatlus in appearance, a pack of hyena, the size of grey wolves. Their bodies were almost hairless, with light grey spots. They had large lower jaws, short tails tipped with barbs and numbered in the hundreds. Their target the dead beasts. Stephen Cho couldn't handle that many hyenas right now. Seeing the situation was bad, he climbed back underground, but he already had some understanding of this world. The creatures in this world were enormous. Many were like mutated versions of beasts had seen before, and there were also super large, dinosaur-like carnivores. The strange occurrences at night were still unclear. The sheer number of dead beasts at the forest's edge was unsettling. Some of the large carnivores weighed over 3 tons, even without special abilities. Stephen Chow wasn't sure he could beat them. He decided to observe for a few days. The surface was now swarming with scavengers. He couldn't even handle the hyenas, so he didn't dare to poke his head out to investigate. After returning to his underground base, Stephen Chow continued mining. 30 meters below ground, he was safe from being discovered by the beasts. A couple of hyenas had come to the entrance, sniffed around, and then ran off when they saw the dark, bottomless hole. At that height, a fall would be fatal. The hyenas had found Stephen Chow by scent, but they couldn't do anything about him now. Come on, jump down. Another beast seemed to have discovered the hole, but Stephen Chow glanced at it and ignored it. 35 meters straight down, at almost 10 stories high. He didn't believe any beast could survive a fall from such a height. Staying underground was a bit unbearable for ordinary people, but for Stephen Chow, it was like a fish in water. He had spent several years mining underground. Not bad luck. Stephen Chow dug down a bit and luckily discovered marble. Its hardness was higher than he had expected, requiring over 100 strikes with his pickaxe to extract a single piece. This marble was incredibly strong and would be very durable for construction. Having decided to build a temporary safe base here, after mining over 300 units of stone, Stephen Chow decided to first remodel the underground space. He had now reached the rock layer. Stephen dug out an underground space 100 meters long, 50 meters wide, and about 10 meters high. To prevent collapse, he used his ability to alter the form of matter to reinforce it, then prepared to begin the most basic renovations. He first set aside a workshop area of about 500 square meters. He directly cut the marble into half bricks and built a wall in a few minutes. Without any adhesive, all the marble pieces were fitted together extremely firmly, looking as if they were a single unit. Currently, with his abilities, as long as he didn't alter the intrinsic nature of the matter, simply changing the external shape and structure was quite simple. Of course, this method was only a temporary solution. If he kept doing this, he wouldn't be able to conserve much energy. Stephen Chow needed to at least restore his strength to level 20 before he could even attempt to leave this planet and explore the outside world. Sometimes he wondered if he was even in his original universe anymore, because spacetime turbulence was terrifying. Stephen Chow moved around, designating a 50 square meter area as the kitchen. He directly selected a slab of stone and, with his bare hands, fashioned a rudimentary stove. It was simple, but at least it could cook some food. As a legendary alchemist, Stephen Chow possessed his own extra-dimensional space. It wasn't particularly large, but it currently housed thousands of units of materials, enough for now. As his strength recovered, he could expand it, even developing it into a demoplane. The entire underground base was largely empty. Most of his materials were stored in this extra-dimensional space. The spacetime turbulence had left him utterly stripped bare. Essentially, he had to start from scratch. Kitchen, bedroom, these were the basic necessities for an alchemist. He walled off 100 square meter space and tossed a solitary single bed inside. There was still plenty of empty space. Stephen Chow placed the cubic meter of soil he'd initially collected in the adjoining area. This would be the planting zone. All he needed was a light source to enable indoor cultivation. He didn't yet know what crops he could grow. Contact with intelligent life would be helpful. Finding seeds would allow for proper planning. Water wouldn't be a problem. There was a river to the north. Given time, he could dig an underground channel. When it came to digging, Stephen Chow claimed second place to none. He was, after all, a man who had once dug through the earth's crust. Alchemists, for the most part, suffered from a degree of obsessive-compulsive disorder due to the asymmetrical colors of the rock and soil layers. Stephen Chow began to remodel the underground base. He expanded the space and used marble half-bricks to build walls, concealing the soil layers. He spent quite a while redoing even the vertical passage, and later installed an elevator for the surface connection. The surface portion of the safe base remained temporarily unconstructed. Stephen Chow installed a trigger door above. After finishing all this, the wood was running low. After climbing up and confirming there was no danger, he headed towards the forest. To get rich, you must first chop trees. Stephen Chow decided to stockpile some wood and then began to explore the underground veins. He still had plenty of food. Enough for 10 days or half a month, adding to what he found during the day. He needed metal. If he had a set of metal enchanted equipment, even a pack of hyenas wouldn't scare him. This world was full of giant trees, and as a tree-felling enthusiast, Stephen was quite pleased. After confirming there was no danger, he began to fell large trees with his bare hands. Unenchanted primitive tools were generally inefficient. He was better off using his bare hands. The efficiency was slower, but it saved energy. By his estimate, he could reach level 1 in about 3 days. At that time, he could restore the ability of his Bay Alchemist's hand, greatly improving both work efficiency and harvesting enchantments. If only I still had the ability to transmute matter. Stephen Chow frantically pounded the giant tree before him, reminiscing about his past, muttering to himself, I still have that golden seed. I don't know what it's for. Once the safe base is established, maybe I should find a place to plant its site. When will I regain the ability to activate construct life? Even making a wooden puppet would be much better than manually chopping down this huge tree. Alchemists excel at creating puppet life. Puppets of various shapes and materials are their most important assistants, tools and servants currently. Stephen Cho cannot activate construct life, even making a wooden puppet requires level 5 strength. According to the classification of some indigenous civilizations, this energy level already belongs to a powerful alchemist. Typically, alchemists in indigenous civilizations can reach a maximum of level 30. An alchemist of this level, even lacking systematic knowledge of extra-dimensional planes, is already qualified to explore other worlds. However, the ranking systems of indigenous civilizations are quite diverse, and Stephen Cho prefers to use his own data-based method for statistics. Numbers are the beauty of alchemy. At his peak, his abilities were almost godlike in the context of indigenous civilizations. During his early wandering years, he once helped an indigenous civilization transform thousands of miles of barren wasteland into fertile soil, almost being worshipped as a deity at the time. The process of felling trees was enjoyable. Stephen Cho quickly felled over a dozen large trees with his bare hands, collecting over 300 units of lumber, before returning to his underground base. Chapter 1004: The Iron Age. After returning to his underground base, Stephen Cho crafted some simple furniture. With his current abilities, he dared not dig all the way to the magma layer. Most of his powers were gone, and a cave-in would leave him helpless. He first dug a mine shaft down over 100 meters, then chose a direction and dug straight ahead. He didn't know how long he dug, but thankfully, an alchemist's sense of time was quite accurate when Stephen Cho returned to his underground base. It was already dark outside. He played with the golden seed in his hand, waiting for the strange sounds from the previous night to reappear. But tonight was unusually quiet. There were no anomalies outside. He curiously climbed up to take a look. The surroundings were silent, except for sounds coming from the forest, nocturnal animals hunting. The enormous purple ring in the sky remained conspicuous, with 3 moon-sized satellites, one dim, one bright, and another fading crimson. This process was visible to the naked eye. After about an hour, it began to brighten. A slight shift in the satellite's position. Stephen Cho, were he not an alchemist, might not have noticed. The shifted satellite was closer to the purple ring, the one gradually brightening from blood red. Night fell. The surrounding area was silent and desolate, as if he had traveled back to a prehistoric civilization. Even Stephen Cho, with his unwavering will, couldn't help but feel a little bored. It wasn't loneliness, exactly, but a desire for some casual conversation, a bit of idle chatter. By the next morning, the third moon had passed through the purple ring, and all seemed to have returned to normal. Stephen Cho's mining operation continued. He had amassed a large quantity of stone, enough not only to build a house, but a section of city walls. The next 2 days were uneventful. Stephen dug 3 tunnels, still without finding any metal ore, but he did unexpectedly discover coal. The coal deposit wasn't large, but it still lifted Stephen Cho's spirits. Coal frequently coexists with metal ores. He dug a circle around the discovery and finally, upon finding some reddish-brown stones, let out a burst of large iron ore, and a good quality hematite at that. Stephen Cho, his spirits high, had been digging until the afternoon. Returning to the underground base, he began to forge the furnace with his bare hands. He currently lacked a mana crystal forging furnace, or an elemental furnace as an energy source. Stephen Cho could only refine the iron ore in the most primitive way. Fortunately, he had recovered 1 level of alchemy, and when he mined the iron ore, a continuous stream of elemental energy flowed into his body, allowing him to now use the ability of the alchemist hand inside the empty underground base. And a basic furnace, over 5 meters tall, was complete. Stephen Cho had placed a rudimentary alchemy array inside, allowing the furnace temperature to reach around 1500 degrees. He gestured towards the pile of ore behind him, and a 10-kilogram piece of hematite flew directly into his hand. This was the ability of the alchemist's hand, to move objects weighing no more than 20 kilograms with his mind. The weight limit increased with the alchemist's energy level, demanding more than a typical mage's hand. It assisted alchemists with many dangerous tasks. This was the basic ability. With gold, silver and rubies, he could use alchemic engravings to enhance it by 100%, upgrading it to alchemist hand type I, also known as the silver hand. Stephen Cho placed the iron ore into the furnace and ignited the coal, controlling the internal temperature. Soon the iron ore began to melt. Using external tools to refine metal was merely a stopgap. A true alchemist could separate iron the moment they grasped the ore. Half an hour later, Stephen had obtained a batch of iron ingots, but Stephen Cho would be swinging a hammer to shape the ingots. He brought the ingots to his workbench and, like magic, began crafting his first set of iron tools, altering the external structure of matter. Using a hammer was an option, but hand forging was just as feasible. Hand forging iron was a daily routine for top-tier alchemists, and Stephen Cho was already adept at it. He first picked up an iron ingot and pounded it a few times with his fist, flattening it in an instant. Then, he began to shape a sword with his hands. The sturdy iron ingot felt like clay in his grasp. His hands worked with the precision of a machine. The entire process took about half an hour. Soon, the outline of a longsword was complete. The sharpening was the only slightly troublesome part. Stephen Cho finished and flicked the blade with his finger. A clear, ringing sound immediately followed. Not bad. He grasped the hilt and swung it, muttering to himself, "It's close to the standard longsword. Dealing with ordinary beasts shouldn't be a problem." For an alchemist, common sense is meant to be trampled upon. The process of forging the sword by hand wasn't important. The crucial step was the final one. Stephen Cho lightly tapped the blade with his middle finger, then, following a certain pattern, left slight scratches on the blade. Finally he pricked his fingertip and lightly wiped it across the blade. A strange, shimmering light swept across the blade, and instantly, the sharpened edge seemed coated with a silvery white film. Iron sword sharpness LV width. This enchantment took a considerable toll on Stephen Cho. A bead of sweat trickled down his forehead. The runes on the sword were flawlessly etched. Without the slightest pause, he swung the completed longsword, then slashed at the nearby iron ingot. Clang! The iron ingot, along with the marble tabletop, was severed in a single stroke. Stephen Cho, pleased with his enchanted weapon, swiftly moved on to crafting other tools, iron pickaxes, shovels and more. Night had fallen, time to stockpile some iron ore. Later, I can build a minecart track for easier resource storage and iron golem creation. After weapons, came armor, for an alchemist. Armor was also something that could be crafted by hand. Stephen made a half-plate set, though without enchantments. He still preferred his alchemic robes and mana armor. Ordinary armor significantly hampered his work efficiency. I can't enchant energy shields yet, and robes are out of the question. An iron suit will have to do for now. Stephen Cho's combat skills were mediocre, while perhaps impressive for ordinary people. He knew they were utterly inadequate, and his combat experience was severely lacking. Before his banishment, he had a legion of golems at his service, and his followers included legendary professionals. For a long time, he'd been accustomed to overwhelming force to solve problems. With iron tools, things will be much easier. Stephen Cho continued planning his secure base. He wasn't yet certain if this world lacked elemental crystals. Magic-imbued crystals only emerged in worlds that had experienced an elemental tide, though their forms might differ. For an alchemist, however, they were all usable. He used a few materials to craft a compass, then muttered to himself, this location is still too remote. I wonder where intelligent beings are located. If there's a settlement of intelligent beings nearby, I could consider digging an underground railway, with this place serving as a station. Alchemists are the biggest consumers of materials. Stephen's demand for materials was endless. Initially he could mine them himself, but later he would inevitably need to gather them through other means. Obsidian, diamond, malachite, ruby, glass, agate, mithril, secret gold ingots, arcane dust, astral sand. Stephen Cho muttered a long list of bizarre materials, shouldered his pickaxe, and continued down into the mine. He planned to stockpile more resources before exploring the surrounding area. The forest was definitely out of the question. It was teeming with monsters, and the pterodactyls were flying in that direction. Human and other intelligent life should be located in the plains, mostly near rivers. He decided to head west. If he could find humans, he could obtain metal, seed, gems, and so on, much faster. Gems, in particular, were incredibly inefficient to mine himself. Alchemists have a huge demand for diamonds, and for someone like Stephen Cho, a high-level alchemist, the later stages require diamonds by the ton. Gold is a standard consumable for alchemists exploring the infinite universe. A single experiment might use several tons. That's why alchemists of the past desperately sought ways to transmute gold, such as the Golden Touch, the Golden Stone, and the Philosopher's Stone. Stephen Cho had 10,000 tons of gold stashed away back home, but he knew he couldn't return there now. 3 days passed in a flash, while mining coal and iron ore. Stephen absorbed the elemental energy present within the minerals, gradually reaching level 2 alchemist. Even as a legendary alchemist, despite the loss of his past power and the inactivation of most of his alchemic engravings, Stephen Cho still retained some legendary abilities within his body, such as enlightened wisdom, rejuvenation and immortal body. Many of these legendary abilities were currently sealed within his body, and reactivating them would require a vast amount of expensive and rare materials. Gold is currently the most scarce resource. Stephen Cho needs to collect at least a ton of gold by the time he reaches level 10 as an alchemist. This is necessary to reactivate a crucial ability within his body, but unfortunately he currently has none. Based on Stephen's initial assessment, gold mines are unlikely to exist in this area. If he can't find any signs of human civilization, he'll have to begin exploring to locate gold deposits. Chapter Zardolos, the natives. A successful, advanced alchemist first derives power from metals. Unlike most mages, they don't spend vast amounts of time studying spells, meditating on. Many alchemists level up unexpectedly during experiments. The most obvious characteristic of academic mages is their use of extensive knowledge and experimentation to pursue the essence of things, ultimately seeking a way to completely master the power of a certain law. Most academic mages are weak in combat early on, but once they achieve a breakthrough in a specific area, they are highly likely to master the power of a law. Stephen's ancestors were such a great academic alchemist, he integrated the power of the law into his bloodline, passing it down to his descendants. Therefore, Stephen Cho isn't considered an alchemist of the mage type, but rather, an alchemist of the sorcerer type. Sometimes he wonders if his inability to break through his limits means he's already as strong as his ancestors. A sorcerer's power comes from their bloodline. They are innately capable of casting spells. Any Stephen can become an alchemist, although talent diminishes with each generation. Stephen Cho is the only alchemist to have regained the power of the law, but is consistently unable to surpass the limitations of a mortal. This makes him wonder if his ancestors only reached this level as well, which is why, no matter how much he develops his innate abilities, he can't break through the bottleneck. If that were truly the case, then he would have to abandon his past achievements and forge a new path, one that transcended his ancestors. 1 week. Stephen Cho's secure base was almost complete. This base one occupied approximately 10,000 square meters and included a workshop, a master bedroom, 2 guest rooms, a kitchen, a planting area currently empty, and 3 vertical mine shafts. The base, primarily constructed of marble, was located 50 meters underground. Access was via a vertical elevator. Activated only by a level Zaumaturgy sigil, it was a temporary refuge, lacking energy crystals and unable to arrange for electricity. Lighting relied entirely on the lowest grade alchemic torches, coal and wood-fueled devices burning for a full day. The base currently boasted only 3 defensive traps, no golem guards, and enough food for 1 person for 3 months. The warehouse held a reserve of 100 units of wood, 100 units of stone, 100 units of coal, and 10 units of iron ingots. Stephen Chow finally decided to explore the world. He needed to gather a great deal of intelligence about this unknown world. Since the Silver Age, spellcasters had attempted interstellar colonization. The origins of the Ophite civilization were untraceable. But the earliest spellcasters had fought the gods and explored the ends of time and space. This wasn't Stephen Chow's first exploration of another world. Leaving the underground shelter put Stephen Chow in a rather good mood. Alchemists, to cope with tedious and monotonous work, must learn to regulate their emotions. This was a plain. To the south lay a forest, to the north a river. Stephen headed away from the mountains, searching for traces of this world's indigenous civilization. Across the boundless wilderness, Stephen Chow journeyed alone, had left markers at the base, ensuring he could always find his way back. A single person felt particularly insignificant in the vastness of nature. The species of this world were dangerous and immense. That afternoon, had witnessed a giant pitcher plant, emitting a strange aroma. Devour a millipede-like creature over 50 centimeters long. The planet's gravity was 1/5 times that of Earth, placing a significant strain on physical strength and endurance. Ordinary humans would require an anti-gravity zone to adapt. It could be inferred that if this world possessed an indigenous civilization, its inhabitants would be taller and more resilient. Stephen Chow's maximum tolerable gravity was 10.5, a level only encountered in elemental worlds. Upon entering the plane, Stephen encountered those hyenas again. They attempted to attack Stephen Chow, but upon closer inspection, discovered their prey was an iron lump. After 5 hyenas were injured, they fled this formidable predator. The 3 moons in the sky remained unchanged. Stephen Chow deduced that they only mutated under specific conditions, and this mutation affected the world's energy field, leading to the strange events he'd encountered on the first day. The lush vegetation supported vast herbivore population. Stephen saw elk the size of adult horses, 6-legged, near-ton rhinoceros-like creatures with keratinous zebra stripes, massive beasts resembling a cross between a rhinoceros and a stegosaurus, and a very familiar, yet extremely dangerous dinosaur species, the velociraptor. From the moment he first saw a pterosaur, Stephen suspected a significant dinosaur population remained in this world. His encounter with the velociraptors confirmed it. These adult velociraptors resembled smaller versions of Deinonychus, intelligent, cunning, vicious, and pack hunters, common in many primitive, desolate worlds. However, dinosaurs didn't appear to be dominant here, a fact that sparked speculation in Stephen. Most worlds teeming with dinosaurs were connected to an ancient god. Stephen's exploration yielded a major breakthrough. On the 3rd day he encountered a migrating human tribe, or perhaps, not quite human, as they were exceptionally tall. The leader was a powerfully built middle-aged man, 3.9 meters tall, clad in grey animal hides. His hair was braided into 3 thick strands, his arms bulging with explosive strength, and his bare chest bore numerous wounds inflicted by wild beasts. His weapon was a bone club, its surface reflecting a metallic sheen. The others ranged from 3.2 to 3.5 meters in height, all possessing unusually pale skin, not the pale of a sheltered life, but a natural, snow-like. Their civilization appeared rudimentary. Stephen observed simple clothing, mostly animal hides, and a few metal tools, indicating a hunting-based lifestyle. Stephen didn't approach them rashly. He'd spotted a potentially dangerous individual, an elderly woman with white hair, wielding a bone staff and adorned with numerous skull ornaments and strange vials. Shamanism, and it looked a bit like voodoo! The tribe seemed primitive and savage. Most adults wore bone ornaments while warriors bore painted tattoos. Such characteristics suggested a pre-civilized people, dangerous, possibly even cannibalistic. They were clearly not pure humans. Preliminary estimations suggest they belong to a giant subspecies. In many primitive desolate worlds, giants often have a habit of preying on other races. Shamanistic doctrine reveres the wild, nature, and the law of the jungle. If they are of the voodoo lineage, then this tribe is even more dangerous. Stephen Chow must observe them before making contact. As an alchemist who has traveled many worlds, Stephen Chow has 2 permanent spells anchored near his brain: Bahia language comprehension and Bahia script comprehension. Although he cannot yet speak their language, he can understand their meaning and can learn their language and script with a little time. This giant tribe is migrating north. They use bone spears as weapons, and even the women are fierce warriors. The giants hunt large antlered deer and 6-legged zebras. Avoiding rhinoceros-like behemoths, they intimidate velociraptors and hyenas with low growls. This giant tribe has only a very rudimentary writing system. Stephen observed them for 2 days after each hunt. The shaman would carve their harvest and casualties onto an ancient stone slab. These giants collect a dark brown herb, mixing it with some metallic powder to create a medicinal paste. This dark ointment quickly stops bleeding. but it's unclear whether the medicine is effective or if their constitution is simply robust. Stephen Cho also collected some of this herb and confirmed its excellent hemostatic properties. This giant tribe roasts their prey, but some adhere to a raw food tradition. They will cut out the hearts of the large antlered deer and six-legged zebras and force the younger members of the tribe to eat them raw. During this time, the shaman will perform strange dances around the bonfire. Overall, this giant tribe is primitive, savage, and powerful. According to the occupational classifications preserved from the Silver Age, an adult giant is at least the equivalent of a level 7 warrior. However, they seem to be extremely afraid of the night. Every night, all the giants gather together around the bonfire, with the shaman's hide tent in the center. She observes the purple rings and 3 moons in the sky and prays every night before a bizarre 5-meter-tall totem pole. They maintain a tradition of blood sacrifice after each hunt. The strongest prey is placed before the totem pole. A 3-meter-diameter black stone serves as the altar, and the blood of the prey seeps into it. This is typical of a primitive tribe. Stephen wasn't sure if he could communicate with them. Many worlds have such groups. Their traditions are extremely primitive and savage. Finally, Stephen Cho decided to try contacting them. These giants rarely acted alone. Hunting parties numbered at least 5 and gathering expeditions included strong female warriors. Stephen witnessed a female warrior tear a hyena, as large as a grey wolf, in half. They had a strange obsession with hearts. The hearts of any beast were dug out and fed raw to their young. Stephen Cho adopted a conservative approach, avoiding close proximity to the giants. He allowed them to discover him first, observing their reaction. So, Stephen Cho, pretending to be a wandering wilderness nomad, appeared ahead of the giants' migration route, initiating his first contact with the world's indigenous people. This episode is complete. Welcome to subscribe. Turn on the small bell. Forward, please leave your comments. I will continue to update the content behind.